Thank you. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. We have quite the star-stacked panel here. We're going to go ahead and do maybe some quick intros, just so that you have some context on who we are. I'll just get started so we don't turn around too much. I run Unruly Capital. It's a small 25 million fund. We invest in mostly deep tech climate stuff, but general deep tech as well. Anything from nuclear fusion, like Renaissance fusion this morning, to algae and alternative materials and proteins. Kinga.
Hi, afternoon. Kinga Stanisławska. I'm a board member of the European Innovation Council, and that's a privilege of why I'm here. The EIC, it's a 10 billion European project investing in deep tech startups. 2/3 are grants, 1/3 is equity, and I'm going to be talking about both the grant side and the equity investments.
Hi, this is Ashwin, long last name. I'm a partner at Energy Impact Partners. EIP is a $3 billion asset management platform. We're specialists focused on climate and sustainability. I specifically lead what's called as our Deep Decarbonization Frontier Fund. It's a $485 million fund that's entirely focused on investing in breakthrough ideas and revolutionary technologies that can have a big impact on mitigating the effects of climate change. EIP is sort of a unique model in how we're built. About half our capital comes from large corporates, about 60 corporates or so around the world, including actually EDF here in France. And we leverage those partnerships to deliver as much value as we can for our portfolio companies. So to date so far, we've done about 1.4 billion in commercial revenues or pilots for our portfolio companies just from our corporate partners. And we continue to hope to do more of that. In terms of check sizes, we're writing somewhere between 5 to 20 million euro checks, or dollars, about the same. And generally, stage-wise, seed and above, till about Series B or Series C or so. So pretty wide in terms of stage investment and also check sizes. So with that.
Great, thanks, Ash. Hi, I'm Pippa. I'm from Zero Carbon Capital. We're an early stage fund investing at pre-seed and seed. We're based in the UK, but we're investing across Europe and Israel. And we're focused on decarbonization technologies, so scientific innovations tackling the biggest, hardest problems of climate change and trying to fix them for good. We invest across the different emission sectors, so everything from bioconcrete to direct air capture to algae biofuels, which are actually a thing again. And if anybody's interested in having a chat afterwards, I'm quite easy to find on LinkedIn, or there's a contact page on our website.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. So before we get started, how many in the audience are founders that need to raise capital in all these different ways? Okay, decent amount. Cool. So I think it's helpful if we do it like in school. We do how, what, where, when, and I think to get started, maybe if we could get an overview from some of you guys on what are, just like maybe quickly, the whole set of different options that are available for founders, maybe aside from the obvious equity one. And then we can progress into figuring out exactly when is the right time to add each specific piece to a company's roadmap, where to find it, and there we'll probably do a nice sort of like EU versus US versus UK, maybe reverse pitch, where you guys can pitch the audience on where is best based on the different instruments, and then maybe we can also open it later to Q&A. So in terms of what are the different instruments, just a quick overview that are available for founders.
Well, I think it's a good place to start with the EIC. EIC was set up about 2 and a bit years ago as a full-fledged fund and instrument. And what EIC has is 3 types of financing which are non-dilutive, which are grant financing. So this was actually, if you were here about 2 hours ago, it was sort of very, very well presented by the head of ISMEA, by Jean-David Malo. And I'm sure the presentation is still available. It's got lots of details. But anyway, it starts at the research level and goes through to a transition level where a researcher would like to spin out of a university and set up a project. And it goes right through to companies. So at the company stage, there is something called the EIC Accelerator, where 4 times a year there are cutoff dates and you can apply for an up to 2.5 million grant financing, which is non-dilutive and which can come with an equity component. Now, the good news is that you can pitch at any time during the year your basic pitch with a short movie and know if you fit for the grant or if you don't fit. And you usually would get the grant within, well, after the application process, which probably lasts a couple of weeks. After you are selected, the grant agreements are signed within a couple of months. So within a 6 to 8 months period, you should be on your way to get this non-dilutive money.
Cool.
I guess I'll go next.
Yeah.
So I work in venture capital, and there is no free money from my fund, so we don't do grants. We're in it to make money too. So, but having said that, most of my views are going to be centric to the US, at least for now, because that's where I'm based and that's where I'm most familiar with. We are in a land of richness today in terms of, at least for climate tech and for deep tech startups, there is a ton of money available in terms of grants. Starting with the National Science Foundation, the NSF grants, and then from that, recently the Department of Energy over the last 10 years has created a group called ARPA-E, which is similar to the DARPA agency, and they've been doling out over $1 billion every year for companies working on hard problems to solve around energy transition and climate tech. And then besides that, once you sort of get to TRL 4 or 5, there are a couple of programs that are really good in terms of helping transition PhDs to being entrepreneurs. One is a program called Activate. Calvin at Activate is actually here. So if you're a founder and you're looking to go through a fellowship program, I would highly, highly recommend the Activate program. And then there is also the new Breakthrough Energies Catalyst program. So several different options around early stage financing. Besides that, there are a couple of groups, one in particular, which is a Prime Impact Fund. So they will only invest in companies that are deemed non-investable by other funds. So sort of a very interesting mandate, but they want to support companies working on climate tech. So this is a fund that's based in Boston, and they're mostly investing in the US, but also investing outside the US. So well done. Go ahead.
And just to pick up on something you said, I mean, really, there is no free money. So, you know, everybody's looking for something, and whether it's, you know, some equity in your company in return for their support, or whether it's somebody who's getting something else in terms of association with you, so it's a strategic benefit to them, like, for example, the government money or corporate money, that you know, it's always be aware of, you know, what strings come with whatever you're accepting. So what are the conditions? What are, you know, what reporting are you going to need to do? You know, what are you going to be expected to contribute? You know, do you need to come and give talks or presentations, or, you know, what is it that comes with whatever you're getting? So I think we talked a bit about grants from Europe. In the UK, you know, the government is the most obvious source of grants. They have a pretty fantastic program, Innovate UK, and lots of different bodies that fit underneath that, different catalysts focusing on different areas. They have a lot of challenges, which are specific projects where they invite people to apply. It's very easy to get on the mailing list for those. And they have very open information on their website. They also have kind of quite broad grants which are available for things like, you know, companies who haven't received funding before, or, you know, women who are, you know, innovating in particular areas. So it's definitely worth having quite a broad look on their website and hunting around for and asking other entrepreneurs for things they're applying for. They sometimes can have quite low acceptance rates. It just is what it is. Yeah, they have to choose the ones they think are best. And working with grant writing organizations can seem like it's going to take a chunk of your money, which it does, but it can improve your chances of success. And then there are other sources of grants or non-dilutive funding as well. Often local councils will have programs, and there are also family offices or foundations who write grants as well as doing some kind of investing. So definitely worth checking that out. They can be quite hard to find though. Like in our space, the Grantham Foundation is super active in early stage grants for academic founders. So they're pretty awesome. Then just finally different categories of support. So in-kind support, so you can often get from people who will give you office space or lab space, or corporates who are willing to give you a corner. So it's always worth asking. This is kind of my main piece of advice really to entrepreneurs, is just to ask, is this the kind of company you'd be interested in supporting? What kind of support can you give me? Who can you introduce me to? What programs would you recommend? And it's always okay to make to have a clear question like that, rather than hoping that somebody's going to offer you something, because they probably won't. So I think we've covered all the main categories. I think finally I talk about incubators, accelerators, venture studios being a kind of a mixed class, where often you're giving up some equity in your company in return for the support of the program, and often some investment as well, some cash investment as well. So those vary massively in quality and in terms of what they're offering, and some of them don't take any equity at all. So yeah, again, worth asking around and checking them out and talking to people who've been on the program to see if they're worth considering.
So I
Go ahead.
have a quick comment. It's maybe a slightly controversial take here, but I think it's probably not best to take too much in grants early on. Because as Pippa mentioned, there's sometimes strings attached with these grants, and there's a chance that if you're an entrepreneur and you've signed up for 2 or 3 grants, that can take your focus away from building your core product and core technology. So I think it's important to be taking grants that are just appropriate to helping you build what you're trying to build, versus trying to just get free money, because that can, you can be sort of a grant chasing organization for quite some time and really never hit the commercial scale that you need to hit to.
We have a lot of those in Europe,
Yeah.
sadly. Yeah, because it takes a lot of work as well to do the budgeting and the reporting and things like that. So in terms of that, if you were a startup that is getting out of university, the lab, or the garage, or whatever, do you have some suggestions on the perfect path to funding that? Is it like equity/accelerator in the beginning to just get out and be a real company, or is it better to do the grants first? How should a company that's just starting really think about the full roadmap of funding? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think it is good to get that balance right, as you say. It's okay to take on the equity financing, because it does give you a lot more freedom and can help you to really accelerate your growth. So I think the support of I think it's worth taking some time to think about what your organization really needs. So if you feel like you don't know what your business plan is, or your go-to-market plan is, or maybe then some of the accelerators or incubators are quite helpful in helping you taking you through a program to think about that in a really structured way. Some of the programs can help you to find a co-founder, and again, while you might be investing some equity in that, it should pay dividends later on. But in general, I think when you've got a clear picture about what you're doing, that's a good time to take on equity, and to try and find somebody who's going to help you to navigate that process, like a friendly investor or an advisor who maybe has done some investing as well, and to help you kind of just work out who are good people to talk to, and help you get investor ready. So what your pitch deck should look like, putting together a data room. Even at a very early stage, it's worth being organized so you can approach somebody and have a very efficient conversation with them.
Either if you have something to add, otherwise I think another good thing is understanding the big mistakes that you've seen founder make. One could be chasing grants in order to chase grants, but any other things to really look out for?
I've got one. So I mean, I think one of the things that you should be thinking if you're a deep tech entrepreneur is how do you prove the technology is going to work at the smallest scale possible? And this is key because you don't want to build large factories and then find out that something's not working. So the de-risking has to happen at the smallest stage possible. And so for that to do, so I think take as little money as you can upfront, prove that the technology works, and then start going and chasing after bigger dollars and bigger grants. One of the things that we're seeing now is that there's a lot of dry powder in venture capital for climate tech. As you've probably seen from this conference, there's probably 100 new funds that are now investing in climate tech. And so as a result, there's a lot of capital out there to invest in companies. And that forces, and I don't know if that forces, but that does end up with companies raising a lot more capital than they should be at some of the earlier stages and chasing larger setups before they've truly figured out whether the technology is ready and then the techno-economics are working as appropriate. So I think that's one major issue that we see in the market today.
Should they be using grants to de-risk more science-y types of risks and then equity to build the businesses? Or sometimes you've got no choice and got to go with equity for everything?
Yeah, I mean, grants are great instruments as long as they're fitting what it is that you're trying to do. Now, the problem with grants sometimes, and it very much depends on the grant type and who you're getting it from, the problem can be that you sign up to a certain pathway and you can't diverge from it. And then you're trying to pivot and you can't because that's not what you applied for and your project has been modified. And there are places out there in Europe that basically punish you for it. There are places out there in Europe that allow you to modify your project. So the best thing you can do is speak to other founders that have been down this roadmap and navigate thanks to their good and bad experiences. Because I think, it's always better to learn from other people. Why make those mistakes yourself if you can save the time, the energy, and the money? But definitely, grants are good as long as they're for the right thing. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of grant-type competitions, grant awards, grant this, grant that. And I mean, some of them are actually adding value because they can put you in front of a potential POC client. So then it becomes interesting because if you can get a grant from a potential partner and that way you can show to your equity investors that you already are in business and that you're already doing a POC of some kind, then that becomes a very interesting attractor for your next investor. But they're not all like that. So again, it's not a very transparent market. It's not like you can go on a page and just learn everything by Googling it. It's a lot of discussions. Hello Tomorrow is a great place to speak to other founders and learn from them what instruments they used, what types of foundations, corporates, institutions they used. And I would just encourage to doing as much networking as possible and just asking those questions like Pippa said.
Yeah, I think
to
you introduced, you go ahead.
I was going to say to Kinga's point, I think you need to be really clear about what your technical milestones are and what is the most important thing to de-risk first. So we've seen that happen. One of the mistakes companies make is that they're de-risking, they're putting a lot of energy and resources into de-risking something that isn't the most risky thing that they're doing. So try and identify what that is. And if in doubt, ask an investor, like what would you need to see to invest in our company, like what level of proof, what results, what level of readiness, and then you can craft a plan around what's the minimum amount of money I need to get to that point, and have the roadmap going out from that.
Kinga was introducing the concept of the first POC, maybe with a partner. That's always great when you see that money coming in for actual development. When do you think it's good, when is it bad to get a strategic partner involved in the business itself with an equity investment? Because we see a lot of startups that are like, like this big partner wants to take the whole round or situations like that. Is there anything to look out for or is it generally a good idea?
Well, I have a much more experienced colleague on the board that I'm sitting of, and he would always say, if you want a strategic partner, then never take one, always take two. Don't give them board seats. That would be another piece of advice. But strategic partners can be super good and super developmental, and revenue is always better than dilutive capital. So in a way, you do need those ways to build that revenue, to build that pathway. And so strategic partners, if you can align them with that, that's awesome. But then there are strategic decisions, and of course you need to have enough balance to be able to raise the next round, to be able to finally exit, and not have any sort of situations that don't allow you to do that.
Become political or...
Or become influenced by something that doesn't give you the full freedom to do what you're trying to do. And this is a marathon, so you don't know where the market's going to be in 7 or 10 years. You don't know what the geopolitical situation is going to be. You don't know many things. So you can't really plan for a lot of this if you don't know. But what I'm saying is I think, strategic partners are good, but ideally in groups and not as a single one. And of course, it's a bit like a mixture of investors is always good. I mean, that's why cap tables are with syndicates of investors working together, co-investing, because each one is adding you some kind of value. And you need the total sum of all that value. So one is giving you more technical skills, one is giving you more market access, another one is giving you maybe his founder experiences. So it's always good to have different types of investors on your cap table.
Kinga just made the point for me for our fund. So we're backed by 64 corporates around the world that all deeply care about climate and energy transition. So we're not a single CVC. We represent 64 different groups, and we're a financial investor. So in our case, that's sort of the main value add that we bring to companies, even at early TRLs and early stages. A couple of our seed companies have been able to get their first pilots with some of our partners, and that goes a long way to being able to help them accelerate from TRL 5 to TRL 8 or 9 in terms of commercial development. So we think we represent the best of both worlds as the EIP.
Nice sales pitch. As we are scaling more towards the later stages of a company's life, say that you have developed the technology, you validate it at small scale, you have maybe a few partners on board, did the first POC. The big sort of looming thing at the horizon is the first of a kind, commercial, sub-commercial scale, plant, prototype, like vessel, whatever companies are building. How do you finance that? Do you try to go for project finance? Do you try to do the first one with equity? What have you seen work? What have you seen not work?
Yeah, I think that this is a financing gap, definitely on both sides of the Atlantic, but much more so over here. That these kind of folk projects, that it's very difficult to get project financing for anything that's not completely proven. And by definition, these things are not. So, but having said that, every technology will have different levels of risk associated with it. So, I think the conventional wisdom is that you use your grant and then equity money to get to a certain stage of pilot. So, you build the small thing in the lab and then a slightly bigger thing and then, one in real life and then ideally build a kind of small demonstrator that is kind of approaching commercial scale. And there's different ways of doing that. We talked about the venture debt and the project financing. I think this is a place where corporates can play a role as well. Like if you can identify somebody that's a good first customer, if that's the kind of company you're building, and work with them and get them to support you in kind with location and process engineering support or whatever it is. I think that is a great role that corporates can play. Again, being careful around the balance between equity and different stakeholders in the business.
So I think there is a financing gap for sure, but I think the other part here is that there's also a talent gap. So if you're an entrepreneur working on climate tech or a deep tech company, by show of hands, does anybody have a good team member on the management team that's developed projects? Right, there's only 3-4 hands. So that, I think, is actually a bigger gap in that folks don't really have good talent in-house to be able to develop the projects. So you can get to a certain stage and you can, prove the technology works and, do small pilots. But you really need somebody on the team that has developed, projects of large scales before and knows how to represent the data, how to represent the techno-economics associated with that specific project, even if it's first of a kind, so that you can go get
And
attractive.
you're saying you need that one internal into the team.
Yeah, I think you need people on your team that know how to develop projects. Otherwise, you're never going to get financed. I used to work at Macquarie Capital before this, which is one of the largest infrastructure investors, and I got to see, how projects were evaluated at the ground level, and teams were sort of really key, and then models, obviously, and then, bankability and EPC sort of wraps around the technology and the offtake associated with the projects. But the team is sort of the key part in getting that to the next steps.
And when do you add that?
You have to get to pilot scale before you start adding that. But right when you're starting to think about your first commercial developments, that's sort of the right time to add. We see a lot of folks adding people on the business development side to sign up off-takers and projects. But I think it's also key to have a project management and a project development function in those teams.
Got it. Kinga, you are one of the founders of Women in Venture Capital, is that right? You want to say a few words about, if there's any specific tips or options or anything that can make it easier
Sure.
to raise?
So just maybe a few words. European Women in VC is probably the largest community of females who manage VC funds or co-manage VC funds. And the aim is to put more money in the hands of those females because they only manage 9% of assets under management in venture. And that's a very, very low number. And what we've seen is that this very much impacts what then is being invested into. So everyone invests in such a way as they understand or appreciate certain problems. And unfortunately, with this funding gap, there are lots of very interesting, very cool, and very necessary products and services that don't get financing simply because they never meet, on the other side, an investor who understands what this is about. And that's a huge problem in certain parts of deep tech. For example, anything to do with female health solutions. I wouldn't call it femtech, although that's an expression used. I mean, it goes much deeper to all kinds of devices and procedures and things, including clinical trials. That, for example, gets not very much financing. And that's a very, very big problem. So, we are working very hard to try to solve this gap, but it is big. We have a pool of potential, first of all, angel investors that we can connect female-led and co-led startups that are having these issues with. And then obviously you take it from there. You see which angel investor best matches what it is that you're looking for. And then we have a pool of different VCs that are co-led and led by women that also invest in deep tech. So if anyone needs contacts, I'm happy to put you in touch with those pools of capital to see, how that goes. In saying all of that, EIC has done a lot of work also with female founders. It has a target of having at least 40% of this $3.5 billion going to female-led and co-led startups. Right now, it's at 20%. So there's a pathway to go, but the path is there, which is nice because many institutions don't set those targets, and I wish they did. I think it would make the world a much better place. I think, as a female co-founder or founder, you do have more of an uphill battle in many ways. But I think also you can get plenty of male and female allies to try and help you. I'm very, very keen on getting as many male allies involved as possible because I think that it's not a project that you do alone. It's something that we all do together. It's good for society. And we need to get those females running those deep tech companies funded. That's what we all need to do because it's good for all of us.
Indeed.
So just a quick another plug. So EIP, we actually have a $100 million fund that's focused on investing in underrepresented founders and underrepresented communities, especially focused on climate tech. So if you're working on those problems, definitely reach out and we'll be able to fund you.
I was going to say, in the UK, there's a a government initiative called the Investing in Women Code. So look for funds which are signatories to that code, because they have to have signed up to have a certain set of practices to make sure that they are, trying to be aware of unconscious bias and having somebody to champion women at all levels in the company. I'm sure other countries have similar things. And likewise, there are funds and angel groups that are focused on investing in women. And finally, the silver lining of being the minority the whole time is that there are definitely groups that are focused on women, trying to help women within the industry. So there are fund managers who really want, if you approach a fund and you go to a woman on the fund and say, please, can you help me? You're much more likely to get a result and get that kind of support. So definitely make sure you are using those kind of networks as well.
Yeah, I think there's two things that are really cool in the UK. One is Diversity VC, which is a great group of different funds and institutions that signed up to it. And it's really worth having a look who's a signatory as well, because those funds are definitely interested in funding different types of minorities and want to push this agenda through. So super, super important. There are also angel organizations like Alma Angels and C Ventures that focus specifically on this area. So I would definitely encourage you to look those up.
Awesome. So we have less than 10 minutes left, and given there were a lot of founders in the audience, and we have some pretty experienced people, does anyone have any questions, or do we have the app? All right, sweet. Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. One question. Anyways, you can ask more questions on here, or also queue them up. Ashwin, how do we get into the VC industry? Yeah, it's side question.
Eight minutes.
We'll maybe park
I do
it
not
for a
have an
second.
answer to this question. I got lucky, so I'm not sure if I have the right answer.
Well, there are a few programs which are super cool. So again, UK, there's something called Included VC, which is just launching. And they're doing a super cool thing. So they're basically encouraging people from different backgrounds and different countries to get into VC, which I think is awesome because we really need diversity in the space. There is also the, what is it called? That's been funded by Local Globe. That's another accelerator program, which they do, which is, again, super cool for young people to get into the VC space. There is a program done by EIT Food to get women into VC, and it's done together with Diversity with VC. Again, you get a few months of training, and then hopefully you get an internship, which is another way, if you're sort of starting at that level and you want to get in early. And then there are ways to get into VC if you're an operator. So if you are a specialist in a given field, what is cool is that Europe now is kind of chasing US in having specialists, not just investment bankers, in VC, which is really good. So technical people, people who are in their specific scientific areas or technical areas are very, very welcome. And the majority of the larger funds really appreciate having people that can truly speak to the founders on the other side and really understand the technical intricacies of a project. So, yes, there's lots of ways to get into VC, actually.
Quick pick up on that. It's the Newton program. So they've got training, and also Future World VC have a intern program for underrepresented people in VC, which is pretty awesome. That's also in the UK.
Yeah, that's the one I meant, yeah.
We've got a couple more in-topic questions. One's, it's good. It's an instrument that we didn't mention, venture debt. It's not, I haven't seen it too often in Europe, but maybe Ashwin.
Venture debt is definitely an instrument that you can use. You have to be somewhat careful in using venture debt because they usually come with warrants and other ownership requirements for the folks that are providing venture debt. It's slightly more expensive capital, and we generally recommend the entrepreneurs to only take in venture debt when it's absolutely needed. More is sort of a bridge to the next round or bridge to a proper type of project finance, because it can be quite expensive and can be quite onerous in terms of keeping the covenants associated with it. So be gentle in approaching venture debt.
Yeah, I think it's in a way easier if you're a B2B software startup and you know what your growth trajectory is going to be to take on venture debt. For deep tech, this is quite
how
a
you're
challenge.
paying it back.
Yeah, so I think more what Ash said, try to figure out project finance, get a person on board who knows how to do it with the different partners, and really for the scaling phase, try to do it like a like a big advisory firm in a sense, you know, be prepared with your business plan, with your case, with your Excel, with your presentation, having thought through all the different elements of regulatory system and so on. That's what ideally you need to do. I think venture debt is a little bit more for software fast-growing companies.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it was a banker that asked the question.
What about customer financing? Good or bad? Can it be bad for your brand and monopoly?
Was that, whoever asked the question, do you mean like more if it's like a consumer-facing product that you're making? Or do you mean like whoever is the first customer for your product, like them?
If you have a few, but big customers, and if one of them want to go in and finance as an investor, to take
Right.
equity, could that be good and bad for your brand? And
Yeah.
is it also going to be tough in a monopoly situation?
I think we covered that earlier, didn't we? Or,
Yeah.
you know, I think, you know, so if anybody's got outstanding questions on that, please maybe come and find us afterwards.
Yeah, we don't have more here. Do we have anyone from the audience that doesn't have the app? Everyone knows where to finance their business. That's great. Yeah. So I'll take the, you know, I'll add a bit to the customer financing thing. I've seen it work very well, and I've seen it gone very bad. So there's, as with all the instruments, it has its pros and cons. The problem with the large corporates is that it's outside of your control, and it's outside of their control, meaning that, you know, like people change jobs quite often, and it's still very much a personal relationship. And so we've seen, you know, conversations go like absolutely, you know, dead because the person left. And that's a big risk. There's all sorts of internal politics and things like that in large corporates, and you can't really do too much about that. So, you know, maybe if it's like a very, you know, global thing inside that organization that everyone is well aware and knows what you're doing and how core it is to them, then that can work. Yeah, aside from the, you know, signaling risk and the other corporates not wanting to work with you because you're financing, you know, by the competitor and they're jealous and stuff like that, you also have the risk of just, you know, having invested a lot of time, energy, maybe brand as well, and then it going dead because that person got a better job somewhere else, which is a bit of a risk. All right. What are the top reasons for deep techs not being able to raise capital? I have 25, so I'll let you guys go.
Yeah, I mean, just I think VCs who don't appreciate deep tech, and so they're looking for things which are closer to market. So I think just do your homework and make sure you're talking to people that are, you know, going to be a possible match for you.
I think, yeah, that's the first thing. You gotta do a short list of the people that you want to have on your cap table and build those relationships as early as possible. And don't expect that somebody will finance around in 4 weeks. That's just not gonna happen. So you need to have a long-term relationship with people. So the earlier you start, the better. And that also means that when you will be looking at the growth stage, you should already be building earlier the relationship, because you will need to prove that you're making progress at some point. So without that relationship, that's super tough.
Yeah, I'll add there, and then maybe you stacked risks for me are no-go, for example, where you have, you know, tech risk and market risk and financing risk and regulatory risk. So I think most investors are fine taking on one of them, and each one will have the preference on which. For example, we're fine with technology risk, and others are fine with market risk. But if you start to add them all, it becomes very hard for people to be able to believe in that.
You know, I think it's just not the technology alone. It's beyond just the tech, like you just said, you know, market and all those things. And when we see companies, we want to make sure that we understand what the vision is and what the story looks like and what the arc looks like for the technology, but also the techno-economics, which is the unit economics of the product that's being built over time, and to see the type of cost curves to where, at least in climate tech, we don't want to see any green premiums associated with these technologies, that over time that those green premiums go away and that they actually can compete just on price. And so we think that that's sort of an important reason and an important evaluator for us as we look to invest in companies.
And time. Outstanding. Right on time. Thank you very much, everyone, for questions and everything. Hope it was helpful.